A 79-year-old man was arrested in June 2025 in Nevada City, California. Nothing unusual there, except this man had been living under a false identity for 31 years after escaping from federal prison. Ronald Keith Harvey had pulled off one of the most audacious and longest-running prison escapes in American history, hiding in plain sight just 150 miles from where he escaped. On January 21st, 1994, Harvey simply walked away from the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. He was serving 60 months for running a massive marijuana operation, over 600 plants and multiple firearms. This wasn't some small-time dealer. Harvey was operating what federal prosecutors called a sophisticated criminal enterprise. But what happened next defied all logic. Harvey didn't flee to Mexico or hide in remote wilderness. He vanished completely, as if he had never existed. For 31 years, one of America's most wanted fugitives was living as an ordinary citizen in a small Northern California town. The question that haunted Deputy U.S. Marshal Cruz Moya for over 3 decades was simple. How does someone just disappear in modern America? How does a convicted felon completely erase himself from existence, while federal marshals search desperately for any trace of him? What investigators would eventually discover would challenge everything they thought they knew about fugitives on the run. Ronald Keith Harvey wasn't your typical criminal. In the early 1990s, he was running one of the largest marijuana cultivation operations federal agents had ever encountered in Northern California. This was a sophisticated network, spanning multiple locations with irrigation systems, security measures, and distribution networks that would have impressed legitimate corporations. When federal agents raided Harvey's empire, they found evidence of a criminal enterprise, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars. The presence of multiple firearms made Harvey particularly dangerous in federal prosecutors' eyes. This wasn't just about drugs. It was about protecting a lucrative operation through potential violence. Harvey accepted a 60-month plea agreement and was assigned to FCI Dublin, a low-security facility. Federal officials believed they had successfully dismantled his operation and that justice was served. Harvey would do his time and hopefully never return to crime. But they had dramatically underestimated the man they were dealing with. Harvey had spent years building a sophisticated criminal enterprise. He understood planning, patience, and most importantly, how to avoid detection. Skills that would prove invaluable in his most ambitious project yet, disappearing entirely. What investigators didn't know was that Harvey was already planning his next move. The same intelligence that built a marijuana empire was now focused on something far more audacious, vanishing completely, and building a new life under a different identity. The details of Harvey's January 21st, 1994 escape remain mysteriously vague. Federal prison officials have never revealed exactly how Harvey walked away from FCI Dublin. When guards conducted evening count, Harvey simply wasn't there. The initial response followed standard protocols: facility lockdown, systematic searches, security footage review, inmate interviews. They found essentially nothing. Harvey hadn't left clues about his escape route or confided in other inmates. He had vanished as if he never existed. Within hours, federal marshals launched a massive manhunt. Harvey's photograph went to law enforcement agencies across multiple states. Authorities were confident their fugitive tracking experience would quickly lead to recapture. But something unprecedented emerged. Harvey wasn't just difficult to find. He was completely invisible. No confirmed sightings, no financial transactions, no contact with associates or family. Harvey had achieved what most fugitives only dream of: total disappearance. Deputy U.S. Marshal Cruz Moya later described the early search as unlike anything he'd experienced. Typically, escaped prisoners make mistakes within weeks. They contact family, use familiar locations, or access money leaving digital traces. Harvey did none of this. What made Harvey's vanishing even more puzzling was his profile. At 48, He was older than most escapees, without physical advantages or international connections. Yet somehow, he had disappeared more completely than fugitives with far greater resources. As weeks became months, investigators realized they were dealing with something extraordinary. Harvey hadn't just escaped, he had erased himself from existence. But Harvey hadn't disappeared at all. He had simply become someone else entirely. The federal manhunt for Harvey became one of the most persistent fugitive investigations in U.S. Marshal history. Deputy Cruz Moya inherited the case in the early 2000s, facing a file thick with dead ends and reports reaching the same conclusion. Harvey had vanished without trace. Moya brought modern investigative techniques to examine Harvey's pre-prison life, looking for patterns explaining his complete disappearance. What he found was a man who had demonstrated remarkable criminal sophistication, the same skills now applied to creating an entirely new identity. Federal investigators used every available tool: financial analysis, associate monitoring, emerging digital surveillance. They worked with local police, state agencies, even international organizations. What frustrated them most was the complete absence of evidence Harvey was even alive. In most long-term cases, there are occasional sightings or transactions providing clues. Harvey provided nothing. He had achieved what investigators considered nearly impossible: complete invisibility in the modern era. The Harvey case took on mythical quality within the Marshal Service. Experienced investigator studied the file looking for missed clues. New technologies were applied to old evidence. Harvey wasn't just evading capture. He was making federal marshals look foolish. But their failure wasn't about investigative abilities. It was testament to Harvey's transformation. While they searched for a fugitive on the run, Harvey was living as a law-abiding citizen in Nevada City, California. While marshals searched desperately, Harvey was living an extraordinarily ordinary life in Nevada City, population 3,000, nestled in Sierra Nevada foothills. It was perfect for someone seeking anonymity, a community valuing privacy where people don't ask neighbors about their pasts. Harvey's location choice demonstrated sophisticated planning: close enough to population centers for employment opportunities, remote enough to avoid intensive law enforcement presence. But what Harvey accomplished challenged every assumption about fugitive behavior. Instead of living in constant fear, Harvey embraced being a community member. He wasn't hiding in abandoned buildings or wilderness areas. He was participating in normal society while maintaining his false identity. The logistics were remarkable. Harvey had obtained documentation necessary for modern life: social security numbers, identification, credentials for employment, housing, financial transactions. This required considerable resources and planning that couldn't happen overnight. Harvey's ability to maintain false identity for 3 decades suggests operational security that would impress intelligence agencies. No contact with former associates, no old financial accounts, no familiar locations attracting attention. Most remarkably, Harvey aged gracefully in his new identity. The 48-year-old who escaped became a 79-year-old living peacefully in Nevada City. 3 decades of successful identity theft, while marshals searched desperately. Harvey's Nevada City life demonstrated something investigators found difficult to accept: complete self-reinvention was possible. While law enforcement sought a dangerous criminal, Harvey may have been living as a peaceful citizen, posing no community threat. After 31 years of dead ends, the break came from modern digital forensics and data analysis that hadn't existed when Harvey disappeared. In early 2025, Deputy Moya's team finally received the lead they desperately sought. The exact breakthrough remains classified to protect ongoing investigations. What's known is that advances in data mining, facial recognition, and cross-referencing databases finally produced a match eluding investigators for 3 decades. The lead pointed to Nevada City, a location never appearing on their radar during 31 years of searching. For Moya's team, it was shocking yet logical: close enough to FCI Dublin that Harvey could reach it easily, remote enough for life without law enforcement scrutiny. Even with location confirmed, investigators faced challenges. Harvey had aged from 48 to 79. 31 years of aging plus possible appearance changes meant visual identification would be difficult for investigators who'd studied his case for years. The team descending on Nevada City in June 2025 represented culmination of one of the longest fugitive investigations in Marshal Service history. These were seasoned professionals who'd hunted Harvey for decades, understanding the significance of finally closing this case. What they found was both anticlimactic and remarkable. Instead of a criminal hiding in shadows, they discovered an ordinary senior citizen living quietly. Harvey wasn't armed, surrounded by criminal evidence, or living in the fortified compounds characterizing some long-term fugitives. Harvey's June 12, 2025 arrest sent shockwaves through law enforcement and public. Here was a man who'd successfully evaded sophisticated fugitive tracking for 3 decades, while living normally just 150 miles from his escape prison. Court appearances revealed Harvey's transformation. Gone was the middle-aged criminal operating a marijuana enterprise. In his place stood an elderly man resembling someone's grandfather, rather than America's most successful prison escapee. Federal prosecutors faced unusual challenges. Harvey's original marijuana charges were relatively minor by 2025 standards, with many states legalizing cannabis, but his escape and 31 years as fugitive represented serious federal crimes demanding accountability. Investigation into Harvey's Nevada City life revealed something remarkable. He appeared genuinely reformed, living peacefully, without evidence of ongoing criminal activity or community threat. This created complex moral and legal dilemmas about appropriate punishment. The case raised broader justice questions. Harvey originally faced 60 months for marijuana operation. He'd now been free 31 years, apparently posing no social threat. What purpose would incarcerating a 79-year-old serve for decades-old crimes? Media coverage was extensive and largely sympathetic. Americans seemed fascinated by Harvey's successful federal evasion and impressed by apparent reformation. Some suggested his case demonstrated genuine rehabilitation possibility outside formal criminal justice, but law enforcement emphasized broader implications. If prisoners believed they could escape and live successfully as decades-long fugitives with minimal consequences, it could undermine the entire federal corrections system. As Harvey's case moved through federal courts in summer 2025, it became clear his story represented something far more complex than simple prison escape and capture. Harvey had accomplished the seemingly impossible: complete self-reinvention under false identity for 3 decades. Legal proceedings revealed Harvey's extraordinary transformation details. He'd created and maintained new identity with remarkable consistency and discipline, never making typical fugitive mistakes leading to capture. Most remarkably, Harvey appeared to have used 31 years of freedom productively. Unlike many fugitives continuing criminal activity while evading capture, Harvey seemed genuinely reformed and contributing to his Nevada City community. Sentencing attracted national attention as experts debated appropriate punishment for a 79-year-old who'd successfully evaded authorities for decades but lived law-abidingly during freedom years. Some argued his successful escape demanded significant punishment regardless of fugitive behavior. Others contended Harvey's apparent reformation demonstrated exactly the rehabilitation federal prison systems seek to achieve. They argued incarcerating an elderly man posing no apparent threat served no legitimate criminal justice purpose. Federal prosecutors ultimately recommended sentences balancing escape seriousness and 31 fugitive years against Harvey's age. Apparent reformation and changed marijuana offense legal landscape. For Deputy Moya, Harvey's capture represented successful conclusion of one of his career's most challenging investigations. Moya had made finding Harvey a personal mission, defining much of his professional life. But perhaps Harvey's story's most significant aspect was what it revealed about human transformation possibility. Harvey had evolved from sophisticated criminal to successful federal escapee, to elderly man living peacefully in small Northern California community. His 31 years of freedom raised profound questions about punishment nature, rehabilitation possibility, and appropriate responses to apparently genuinely reformed individuals. Harvey's case challenged simple crime and punishment notions, suggesting human capacity for change extends even to serious federal crime perpetrators. In the end, Ronald Keith Harvey accomplished something seeming impossible in the modern surveillance era: complete disappearance and successful self-reinvention while living in plain sight. For 31 years, he was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, hidden in the most obvious place, among ordinary Americans living ordinary lives in small-town America. His story remains one of the most remarkable fugitive cases in American criminal history.